Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the 13%. I am your host, Cynthia McDonald, and I am just so glad that you all came and joined this particular broadcast. We're going to be speaking momentarily with Dr. Jared Ball of Morgan State University, and also the author of The Myth and Propaganda of Black Buying Power. But before we get started, just want to get a few housekeeping items out of the way. Please make sure that you like this video, share it on your various platforms, and also don't forget to subscribe to YFNA News so that you can go ahead and get notifications every time that YFNA goes live with our show, The 13%, in black and white, and also other content that we're going to be coming out with very soon. So yeah, there you go. So with that said, one of the first things that I would love to do, because I'm not doing the show by myself, we have a brand spanking new co-host of the 13%. Can we please bring up Mr. Producer, Mr. Arthur Ward?
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm not brand spanking new. I just made 64 years old today, so I'm not exactly in that category anymore. But I love the platform, and I'm glad to be a part of it at this point.
We are so glad to have you, Arthur.
Yes.
Arthur is an active member of ADOS Chicago. He's the vice president of that particular chapter. He's an activist. He's an advocate. He's also a writer. He writes on his brand new blog, ADOS Absolute. So make sure that you guys check that out as well. All that great stuff is in the show notes below. So one of the other things that I wanted to do also is over this past weekend, we did lose two civil rights activists that were giants in their particular time, and we want to acknowledge them at this particular time. Representative John Lewis and also C.T. Vivian. We just want to go ahead and acknowledge them passing, and also the work that they have actually done to help forward the cause. And hopefully with platforms like this and also things that are going forward, that we can really pick up the mantle where they left. Yeah, exactly. All right. Okay, so Arthur, are you ready to go ahead and get into this hole you dig?
Yes.
All right. Okay, well, so let's go ahead and bring on our guest this evening. I just want to do a quick introduction. Dr. Jared A. Ball is a father and a husband. And after that, he is a professor of communication studies at Morgan State University in Baltimore, and is also the curator of the multimedia website, I Mix What I Like. And he's also the author of The Myth and Propaganda of Black Buying Power. So please welcome Dr. Jared Ball.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. I actually had in the notes applause, so I want to make sure that happened. So let's just get into it. Dr. Ball, I know that I just did like a very brief introduction of you, but do you want to just expand on your background and who you are and all that great stuff, and even how we even came to this space right here?
The only other thing I would want to add perhaps is that I've been involved with grassroots activist politics for a couple of decades, and try to expand alternative and radical forms of communication in the work that I do. But the bio is as simple as is necessary. It's not that deep.
Okay, gotcha. All right, so let's just get into it. So Dr. Ball, can you just go over what really inspired you to write this particular book?
So first of all, I just want to thank you all for having me on, and I appreciate the chance to discuss the work. Obviously, that's why anybody does the work, chance to discuss it with the communities that they're targeting with the work that they're doing. So obviously I'm happy to be here, and I appreciate that. The shortest answer I could give is that where I ended a moment ago in 2+ decades of activist work, everywhere I went, regardless of the space, and I'm from some mainstream, even conservative spaces, but mostly in really grassroots, radical, and very even militant organizing spaces, there would be a version of this myth propagated in one form or another. And the myth is something we've all heard who deal in Black public spheres of any kind. We've heard a version of this that, as is reported even just yesterday, that Black people have $1.4 trillion in buying power, and that if we were just more quote unquote financially literate and responsible, we could use that money with a greater level of maturity and somehow close the gaps of inequality or even get rid of them altogether. And at the same time, either through study or just reading reports or talking to people in these gatherings, even hearing them in the presentations that would promote this myth, I would also hear and read all the more accurate at least, economic research coming out about the condition of Black people, and the two didn't match up. So when I started writing for Black Agenda Report about 10+ years ago or whenever it was, I figured, well, this would be a good time to try to take up, really look into what I thought was a myth. And so for about 10 more years, on and off, I kept following and tracking the myth, and finally got a chance to write a short book about it and try to summarize that work, and that this is what that is.
Very good. So let's go ahead, since you actually talked, kind of like touched on this whole notion about this $1.4 trillion in Black buying power. Ethan, if you don't mind, can you go ahead and show that first chart? Okay, thank you. So according to this particular chart that we have up here, we can see like where it kind of breaks down like the share of U.S. population as far as like buying power compared to other races and ethnicities. And you can definitely see where that $1.4 trillion is actually marked on that particular screen. But I'm really curious to know if you can kind of touch on exactly where that particular number came from.
Sure. First of all, I can't see it on the screen. Where did that chart come from?
Actually, this was a chart that was sent to me. I'm not really sure exactly which source it came from, but that particular chart was actually sent to me by a few other YouTubers from Be the Power team. But I'm not sure exactly where the actual source is.
Well, then I don't. Yeah, I only asked because I was just curious, particularly about the multiracial category, because in most of the work that I look at that charts Black buying power, so I would want to know how they counted multiracial, because usually so-called mixed race African Americans are counted as part of the Black buying power numbers, but essentially the numbers come to the same. So Black people have, if you believe in the concept or understand it even as it's accurately meant to be understood, Black people still only have 8% or still less than the population size of the community. But the numbers come from, and this is really the appropriate place to start, the numbers come from marketing and advertising data, and specifically from the Selig Center in the Terry Business College in the Bank of America building in Athens, Georgia, which is, as its own mandate says, is there to help bridge the gap between advertisers and the Georgia business community. And what those numbers are meant to reflect are not, as it's reported to us, as money that we actually have and can use as we want to use. It's a measurement, it's an extrapolation, as in their own reports, it's a estimate or a projection of what money Black people have to spend on available goods that they can buy, which are owned and promoted and marketed by the advertisers themselves.
Wow.
So in other words, it's a measurement of the ability of those communities to enrich the owners of the products they're buying. It is not a measurement of their income. It is not a measurement of their wealth. And it is not a measurement of a pool of money that, again, we could say, well, we could spend a couple $100 million here and a couple $100 million there. No, it's an aggregate of what they think Black consumers are spending. And then if you as I did, if you pay the $125 to get the actual Selig Center report, you'll spend that money and then you'll read and you'll see them say in their own report, we really don't have any way of telling you how much Black buying power really is.
Wow.
We're offering you estimates and projections based on our model, which they also don't explain. So the methodology is really unclear. It's really confusing. And again, it's not meant to reflect the money we actually have. The problem is we'll get to is the way it ends up getting reported primarily in the Black commercial press, which is what I discovered in the process of doing this book. It's really more of a problem than I would have thought or would have hoped it would be.
Wow.
That's
what is
something.
the point? What is the point at which they even started an estimate of that kind? And have you found their projections to be accurate in any way?
Well, no, I mean, you could start with the simple fact that in 2019, I believe, and I have the exact numbers in the book, but the last numbers we have data for show that Black people collectively earned 800 billion, little over 800 billion.
Okay.
So there's no way we could be spending over $1 trillion and have that be meaningful other than, because if you're spending more than you're earning, that's debt, that's not wealth, that's not power, that's horrible. So that's one place to start. The reason the numbers are desired, as I said a moment ago, the numbers themselves are mythical. They're guesses. But the reason the numbers are important is because Black and all commercial media, but in this case, Black commercial media need to project a wealth or a consumption power in the Black community that would attract white corporate advertising revenue. So every year, about 500 or so billion dollars are spent by advertisers in commercial media. So everybody's trying to get their fair share.
Okay.
And obviously, if you're trying to convince somebody to give you ad revenue, you need to convince them that the people reading your work can afford to buy and will want to buy what you're selling. So that's where Johnson comes in. That's where the Black commercial press comes in. And that's one of the main, if not the main reason why so many of us are confused, because as you see on that list, and I still have buying power as a Google alert. So every day, even today, I get an alert saying how it's being reported and discussed. And every group has buying power assessed. Every group that can be broken down, white men, Black men, certain age groups, certain gender, sexuality, everything, religious preferences, everything is broken down. Municipalities, businesses are measured, governments are measured for their buying power. Everything is measured, but again, all for the purposes of saying, of directing ad revenue, not for trying to explain the economic condition of these groups, but only with us. Has been turned into a particular kind of weapon because of the particular history that Black people have in this country that changes it all up. So Native Americans, Latinos, other groups, they have buying power assessed, but they're not to the extent that I'm aware, at least. And in their presses, it's certainly not the case. They're not having all these conversations saying, well, we Indians and Native people and indigenous people would be better off if we just marshaled our buying power. No, there's we need our land back. We need our resources back. You reneged on every treaty. Like, we need that addressed. Like, nobody else is saying, shop and consume and regurgitating certain myths about our dollars and all this other kind of stuff. And there's a very specific history that I try to quickly outline to just explain. Yeah.
I wanted to quote from your book because I wrote notes, and just like for the overview of what you were just referring to, I believe I want to say this is like in the second or third chapter. The claim that African America has roughly $1 trillion in buying power is popularly repeated mythology with no basis in sound economic logic or data. While the myth has a longer history, is today largely propelled by misreadings and poor false interpretations of Nielsen surveys and marketing reports produced by the Selig Center for Economic Growth at the Terry College of Business House and the Bank of American Financial Center in Athens, Georgia. But I kind of wanted to go back because there was a portion that you were talking about in the book about the Nielsen surveys. And basically how they were interpreting like the buying power, or this quote unquote buying power that African Americans have. I think that you mentioned that, this was basically based on, I guess, like a collection of surveys that was sent out to people, and they were reporting back what they would actually spend on certain goods and services. Is that correct? And can you?
That's at least part of it. That's at least part of it. So what Nielsen does is kind of slick, because Nielsen works with the Black press and others to produce these reports for Black buying power, to direct, again, ad revenue. So what they do in their reports is they do take surveys of Black consumers, and they'll say, but they do it just like they do TV ratings. So just like 1,500 households determine what apparently all 300 million Americans are watching, it's only 1,500 households that determine what show is a hit. So it's not that many. Right. And so they'll grab, at one year it was 80,000 Black consumers who went shopping over the Christmas holidays were asked what they bought and what they spent their money on. And they take that and extrapolate those numbers to 40 million people or whatever, and come up with a number. But really what they're doing is they're just coming up with a way to break down the spending, and then they reflect back and cite the Selig Center's claim for $1 trillion. So Nielsen just adds some of the detail about where Black people are spending their money. So they'll say, out of the people we surveyed, there was $100,000 spent on shoes and $200,000 spent on electronics. And so then they'll extrapolate from that and say, well, if this amount of shoppers spent this amount on TVs, then we can basically guess that this amount of the whole population will spend this much on TVs. And then they'll just say in their reports, this is how the 1 point whatever trillion is being spent, and then they'll have a little footnote that says this buying power number comes from the Selig Center, and then you go to find the Selig Center and you find out that you can't actually look at their data without buying the report. Right. And by the time you get there, most people aren't going to do all of that. So you just see all the headlines, particularly in the Black press, just again from 2 days or yesterday, in fact, saying Black buying power increases, such and such, make some other claim, and then you read it, and then it says something about buying power from the Selig Center or Nielsen, and then it makes whatever claim the journalist or author wants to make, and some of it's radical, some of it's conservative, some of it's silly, some of it's serious, but they're all basing everything on this mythological number. So whether I agree with it or not, or whether you agree with what they're claiming to do with it or not, it doesn't matter. Even if you want the plan to work, it can't work on a faulty platform.
Well, they have Nielsen has a bunch of actuaries working for him with crystal balls. So that
but they also,
and I know that for a fact.
Well, look, and then any of us, particularly in media, will know that Nielsen has a really funky history in how they measure Black consumers. There's been all kinds, even legal cases brought up about it. There's been all kinds of, there's funkiness there. Of course, they have an incentive to create these numbers because they get paid. They get everybody's and then everybody's getting paid, and then we're the victims because we have all this misreporting delivered on us, and then we start making our plans, and we start trying to plan either individually or collectively. People start businesses. I had one of the brothers that was helping me develop a promotional video was like, he was looking at me funny one day, and I was like, what's the matter? He said, man, I've developed, my whole business model was based on the belief that this was real.
Wow.
So he's like, I'm developing a Black business model because I'm thinking this money's out there that I can get. And now here I am trying to help you promote this book, and you're telling me this isn't right. And I'm having a little struggle here. And I was like, I'm sorry. And believe me, all I can say is I don't benefit from this. It doesn't make me happy. It doesn't make me money. It doesn't help my career. It doesn't do anything. I don't benefit in any, I get to talk to you all maybe when I wouldn't normally get to, but that's about it. So it doesn't, I'm not thrilled to be bringing this bad news. I just really want us to have a better platform to develop our plans going forward, whatever those plans are.
It's kind of funny that you mentioned that, especially about your friend, like trying to develop his particular business based on the information that he thought was accurate, but really it wasn't. So this whole thing came about, I think that I kind of, when we first spoke, is when I posted one of your videos in lieu of seeing a big push on social media for hashtag blackout. And for those, if you are not familiar, audience, of like, what the hashtag blackout was, it was basically a campaign to encourage Black people not to spend their money for a day, or if they're going to spend their money, just spend it on Black businesses so that the economy at large in the United States can understand the buying power that we have, and force some type of agenda to be pushed forth in our particular wake of betterment, and I was, but when I actually happened to see that, I was like, is this really effective? Based on being more familiar with Black people's wealth, especially, people who descended from chattel slavery in the United States, where how we share the wealth is very low. As far as our income is low compared to other races, our education, all these particular things is very low. So, how, if we're saying that all of this stuff is a myth, and I kind of want you to go over like why did you say myth and why did you say propaganda when you were talking about, even when you put this particular portion in your title, why would it? And then going back to what I was saying before, like doing this whole like campaign for hashtag blackout, would it be that effective? So my first questions are, explain why you say myth and why you say propaganda, why you use those particular words, and then lead on to if you feel based on what you know, an economic pooling of this particular campaign would be effective or not.
So myth is in the title, myth and propaganda are in the title, because more than anything, my argument has, less to do with economics and more to do with ideas and media and how concepts are developed and promoted. Because the economics, as we just talked about, are really pretty simple. If you just look at the numbers and look at the studies I cite in the book, if you just look at the reporting that comes out regularly but doesn't get a lot of attention, there's so much showing what many people know just from looking out their own window and living their lives. It's just a bad situation for almost everybody, particularly for us, for Black people, for Black, as you were saying, descendants of chattel enslavement. It's really bad. And this was before this crisis. It's about to get even way worse. So I'm really, we're going to need some unity and some communication more than ever. But so the myth just again says that we have this money and we're basically only poor because we're ignorant, and that somehow that wealth is created by shopping habits and spending behavior, and that's not how wealth is created. That's not how the white people that have wealth got it, and that's not how anybody else could make it. So that's where the myth part is. The propaganda comes in the media delivery system that is developed in this country intentionally, particularly after the Second World War, to create a propaganda apparatus that would make media, as they discussed it, an atomic bomb without the mess. This is what the founders of my field of communication said. That communication studies was to study how to manipulate people, how to turn citizens into consumers, how to turn white Europeans into white people, what that means to be white here in America, because that didn't mean the same thing in Europe. It has to be, and it has to teach former African people, enslaved people, to be what it means to be Black here, because what they mean it means to be Black isn't what we think it should mean to be Black. It's something. So all of this has to be taught without as much physical violence as possible, because that's the most sophisticated mechanism of manipulation. If you can get people to do what you want them to do without the threat of violence. By the way, I say this in my class all the time. We've all experienced this as parents. The moment your parent or you as a parent raise your hand to become physical with your child or as a child, that's the least powerful moment that they are experiencing. That's where the violence is coming from. Because if the power is exerted when your mother or father could just give you a look, or where you would just do what they wanted you to do without being told anything, that's power. That's the minute they have to raise a hand and physically put something on you, may hurt, but that's their weakest moment. And that's the way the military is here. All kinds of propaganda is developed in this country before the bombs drop, before the guns fire. All kinds of propaganda has already been developed. So this country has been using it more than anybody else. So all this talk now about Russia and all that, nobody has developed and uses propaganda like people like the United States. It's almost unfair to make comparisons historically. So that's what, so anyway. So that has been what I wanted to talk most, at least a good portion about in the book. How is it that what is ultimately a very easy economic concept at its base is so confused and so taken without even people questioning it everywhere you go? So that's where I want to, and that's what I think I've developed an answer to. But that's why I was doing it, because it's all messaging and communication as warfare and psychological warfare. In fact, it has very little to do with actual economics.
Well,
hey, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Arthur. Go ahead.
Well, but I would say after reading your book that it could be the basis for a new economic philosophy as far as buying power in the Black community. So you're still heavily in the realm of economics. So I will say that. Okay.
Fair enough. Okay.
Now I'm going to lean again on the third chapter. Third chapter in your book is the hot chapter. I just want to let you know.
Okay.
But in the third chapter of your book, you recall an interview with law professor Marsha Filipello, in which the insufficiency of support for Black businesses was not enough for Black economic uplift, but economic integration was necessary. And I'm quoting, Filipello said during our interview, you can segregate people, but you cannot segregate money. Hers was a similar response to and critique of the claim still made today that Black people can improve themselves and their collective lot by shopping Black, investing Black, and making the dollar rotate in our communities as it does in others. As Filipello explained, wealth cannot be generated in this way because A, wealth is created by investments in the broader national and global economies, not by circulation within one isolated group or economy. And most relevant here, B, Black people do not have enough money to generate, support, and sustain enough businesses who themselves can satisfy the consumer needs and wants of an entire Black community. When asked specifically, has there at any point in Black history been a time when if all Black people pooled their wealth and used it collectively that they could have overturned their persistent inequality? Her answer came quickly and was simple. No. Now, with a response like that, sir, what do we do? Since it looks like Blacks don't have any easy access to those doors that enable investments in the broader national and global economies, I am open to a creative response.
Well, look, I try to offer one in the book. I admit it's a struggle to come up with an answer. I don't know exactly what to do. By the way, what is left out of that answer, and it was ringing in my ears, you were reading it. First of all, I appreciate that you all read the book, because one of the issues that I've always had is and even since the book came out, is people don't read the work and have even when they want to support or agree with me. They do it, I would prefer that they did it after, checking out the work. But definitely, if you disagree, at least listen to the argument. So I appreciate that. Okay. The part that's left out that again was ringing in my ear is that the first part of establishing wealth is military conquest, and I even left that part out in that quick summary. You have to always remember that before the development of markets and the investment of capital is the conquering of a region, of conquering of a people. You have to conquer a territory. The reason the United States seemed to support decolonization against Europe for the continent of Africa and elsewhere wasn't because they cared about the people. It's because they wanted to get rid of the colonial power so that they could get in there with their investments. They had to get rid of King Leopold and the King of Germany, the Germans. They had to get rid of the English. They had to get rid of everybody so they could invest with their corporate money and their investment. You have to conquer the region first. So, if we were being honest and looking to compete at that level, we would have to be thinking about developing a military and going to war and conquering territory. But in the interim, since that's not on the table, what I'm advocating in the book is that we go back to what are the real power that I think that is the only real power we have, which is organized social political movements, and then go after the political apparatus of the country. And by that, I don't mean voting and supporting the currently selected politicians and all of that. But in short, I would advocate more using the vote the way Malcolm X and others advocated, where we were developing platforms and candidates and movements to support them, and then ultimately sending people to Congress and elsewhere to develop redistributive policies, because it's public policy that determines wealth and how it's made and who gets it. It determines what businesses can function and what they, and where the money goes that's created. So instead of going after the mythical $1 trillion of buying power, I want us to go for the very real $20 trillion that is created every year in gross domestic product that we all contribute to when we pay taxes and buy food and go to the movies and buy the fancy lattes and whatever we're doing. We shouldn't be condemned for the shopping. We should be praised for it, because one, it keeps people in. First of all, to go back to that second, okay, let me answer. I'm sorry, the second part of that question. Forgive me.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. The reason the boycotting doesn't work is because one, we don't have enough organization to sustain the boycott long enough to affect what are ultimately global private equity and corporations. People always talk about the bus boycott in Montgomery. That was targeting one bus system in one municipality for 370, 80 days or whatever. It was more than a year just to break down that one bus company. Think about the level of organizing we would have to do nationally to impact international conglomerates who are making trillions all over the place. So that's one thing. The other reason that boycotting, at least on a long term, doesn't work is because many of our people and poor people in general are working at the places that need people to go in there shopping. If we're boycotting even these companies we don't like, there are people in our communities and our families that are working there that need people to go in there. And as we're seeing right now in this crisis, when people don't go shopping and aren't participating in the economy, everything collapses and the elite have to create $6 trillion out of nowhere and give it to themselves.
I know, right? Yeah. It was kind of funny. Like I was, because I have a lot of fights on Twitter because, I do that to pass the time. And why not? COVID. But one of the things that I know that like every time that we get pushback, especially when you're talking about political advocacy for basically, government pay us for what, you stole, people like, we can't afford it. And I remind them, I said, do you remember how the government came off of $2.2 trillion in 1 week? No, I'm sorry, less than a week.
Yeah.
And basically paid themselves because the majority of that money went to corporations.
That's right. And the $1,200 that got shipped out to working people got sent right back to those same elite people anyway, because everybody paid their bills, the landlords got paid, and that's what they wanted. So it's not that it was really, that should be being given out every week so that people could stay home, be safe, and continue shopping from home, supporting businesses when they can, and being like, that's the social contract. We'll take care of you till you get better, then go back to work and take care of us. And it should be, again, hashtag respect my consumption. Don't tell me not to go shopping, and to not buy hair and rims or whatever we're always condemned for buying. We should be buying more, and the wealth that creates should just come back to all of us in terms of healthcare and education and whatever. I mean, whatever. Tax breaks so that, tax subsidies so we could spend money on whatever our favorite media is, so that we could say, I want to, instead of I'm paying, whatever, $100 to Hulu, I want to give, I want a tax subsidy from the wealth I'm helping create that would be spent with the 13%. As Jared as a consumer, I want to support this show. I don't want to have to support whatever cable company that I don't even watch just because I want to be able to get local news. In other words, like there's millions of, you talk about, coming up with new ways for the economy. This is, to me, the perfect moment we should be doing it, because the current economy clearly doesn't work.
Well, let me ask you this. As of today, what role do you see Black entrepreneurship playing in terms of Black empowerment and the harnessing of Black buying power at this point?
Honestly, I mean, I don't think they can do much. I mean, I'm not. First of all, I think we should support Black business. I think that Black business should accept whatever social contract comes with that and find ways to, in whatever they're doing, to support the Black community. I certainly don't want to help create just a Black bourgeoisie. And we hear all the time that poor Black people get into the NFL, and then we hear them talk all the time how they always end up voting Republican. That's not the contract that I want. I don't support the Democrats either, but I'm just saying, but that's not the kind of contract I want. I don't want, you know what I mean? I don't want to just create a Black wealthy group that's going to sit away and look down on everybody and not help everybody else. So what I would want the social contract to mean is we support your business, and somehow in whatever way you can, whatever money you're making, whatever political influence you have, or whatever platform you develop, you're doing something that's helping advance the causes of people in the community.
Mhm.
But as I was saying in that quote you read, we can't make enough Black businesses wealthy enough for them, even if they wanted to be helpful enough to all of us. So I was just thinking, this comes up for me all the time too. People say, well, if one of us would set up a shoe company, we would stop spending all that money on Nike and we could buy a Black shoe company. But okay, that's cool in idea, but you'd have to think about even what's happening now in the crisis. One of the reasons why that money was developed and given away, and now it's over again $6 trillion, is because even Nike on a day-to-day basis has to borrow money from probably JP Morgan or some other bigger bank to cover the payroll for its employees for that day. Why?
Yes.
Because the money that they're making is constantly being invested somewhere else and turning over and making Phil Knight or whoever the executives are today even more and more money. So that's sort of the point. If we go to the Black, the Black shoemaker and start supporting her or him, they would have to get capital investment in the hundreds of millions and billions from some major bank to be able to scale up, to be able to produce enough of the shoes for us to buy. Otherwise, we'd be putting in orders and waiting, 2 years for a pair of shoes.
Right.
And what ends up happening is if we all start flooding that business with business, it collapses. It would probably kill the business more than anything because they wouldn't be able to, they would go bankrupt or whatever trying to keep up. In fact, Killer Mike showed us this in his Netflix series. If any of you caught that, he shows on the one hand, he supports the buying power concept and says we should support Black and do better with our money. But when he takes the Crip and Blood representatives to try to start their soda companies to bring peace, the first thing he has to do is go to a white elite venture capitalist to get funding.
Right.
I'm saying that's exactly the point.
Right.
Because there's not enough money. Anyway, so the Black entrepreneur, I think, needs to just take his or her normal place in the community and not be seen as the savior, as I think the buying power myth wants to create the hope for. And just like the rest of us, we all have to try to find ways and with whatever resources we get to help other people. They have to do the same thing. And I don't think that they should be looked at as the saviors. I don't think we should be looking at propping up Black businesses with the idea that they're going to somehow redistribute and trickle down money to the rest of us in a way that's going to really close the gaps in income and wealth that we suffer. By the way, and the elite have control of the political apparatus, and part of the myth is to get us away from that.
Right.
And to only focus on business and whatever, but they themselves know that their businesses depend on control of the government to, again, manage tariffs and taxes. The study that just showed again, what was it, 70% of unpaid income comes from the top 1%, unpaid taxes come from. So even if they paid their own taxes, all of us would have the money we needed. You know what I mean? So but if so we can't compete economically. We're never going to catch up. Our only hope is to see what the influence that we see coming from people being in the streets, developing political movements, hopefully organizing them a little bit better to create demands and people who could follow through with those demands and try to get control of that apparatus of government to a certain extent to say, if we're creating 20 trillion in GDP every year in gross domestic product, that is the value of all the goods and services and products transacted in a given year. Why are we arguing over anything, even reparations? Why is anybody arguing over anything? $20 trillion a year, my goodness. Nobody should be suffering for anything. And then we can all go to our various separate communities for the other kinds of healing that we need. Because I don't think, Black people have their own particular healing. Others have their own particular healing. But in terms of the money, we're all creating this wealth, and I'm sick of being told that I gotta argue with you and someone else over what portion of that wealth that we should get. When it's just ridiculous.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like even though, like I said, I have a propensity to argue on Twitter about these things, but at the same time, there should not be an argument on things like pain, especially when it comes to redress, repair, reparations, especially. Because it's old, and there's and the kind of funny thing that you even mentioned concerning not looking to Black business as saviors. but actually looking to where we really should be looking at, as far as like where other businesses look at, which is government.
Mhm.
You know, because like I know that like oftentimes we would hear, oh, just go ahead and get into like a MLM, and then put in your money, and then you can go ahead and start producing product, and then you'll be fine. But regardless, even to make yourself a viable business person, you need capital. You need like and even if we if we again we look at the wealth share of what we have as a group, that's just not something that we have. But I wanted to kind of go all the way back when we were talking about the Black publications kind of sharing in this particular myth.
Mhm.
Mr. Producer, if you could please pull up The Secret of Selling the Negro. And I just want to set this particular video up, people. So this was a video, this is a film that actually came out in 1954 by Johnston Products, by Bob Johnson's Publishing. And
John H. Johnson,
No,
not Bob.
John Johnson.
right, John Johnson's Publishing. Thank you. And it was basically a film that was produced in order to get white corporations to buy ad dollars so that they can do black targeting, black market targeting. So go ahead.
Hello, I'm Bob Trout. I've got a story here that I think is big, really big, because it's bound to have a terrific impact on business. I'm talking about a new market, a big new market, millions upon millions of new prospects with $15 billion to spend. That's right, I said $15 billion. That's a lot of money, isn't it? The surprising thing is that it's a fresh market, still full of opportunities. It grew up so fast, got so big in a hurry, that few of us realize its scope. Now, these days, nobody's likely to pass up chances to sell. And yet right here in our own front yard, there's a neglected market. There's money waiting to be spent. To get the story of this market, to be able to tell you the secret of selling the Negro, we did a lot of digging. We talked to leading businessmen, the customers, and the salesmen. We went to Washington, D.C. We set up cameras and other key points around the nation. And out of this all, there emerged a story, the story of a new market. Yes, this is the market we're talking about, the new Negro family. Their name is Wells or Wilson, Smith or Brown or Alexander or Breen. They live in Chicago, in Atlanta or New York, in Detroit, St. Louis, Los Angeles, any one of 1,000 cities and towns. All over the country, families such as this are enjoying new prosperity. They have new interests, new standards of living, a buying power they've never enjoyed before. They're good prospects for practically all types of goods and services. All too often, though, they're overlooked prospects. Why? Because of some good, valid reason? No. They're overlooked because of mistaken ideas, because of out-of-date ideas about how the Negro lives and how he buys. The truth of the matter is that the Negro lives pretty much the same as other folks. He buys pretty much the same way, too. But just the same, a lot of old doubts and opinions keep cropping up over and over again.
I don't like to do business with Negroes. They're drifters. You can't keep track of them.
Yes, although a lot of people think that way, the truth is that 1 out of every 3 Negro families living in cities today owns its own home. That figure comes directly from the United States Bureau of Census.
Maybe so, but Negroes are poor credit risks.
Not more of a credit risk than any other group. Actually, the Negro homebuyer meets his payments faithfully, often more faithfully than other race groups in the same economic level. That's the information we got from people who ought to know, the National Association of Real Estate Boards.
Well, maybe, but I've always heard that Negroes buy shoddy, poor quality merchandise.
No, it's just the other way around. According to leading researchers, in proportion to population and income, Negroes buy more quality products than any other comparable United States group. You see, there are a lot of confused notions about the Negro customer. But when you dig right down and find out about them, they just don't hold water. Negroes own homes. They meet their payments faithfully. They buy good brands of merchandise. So why let a lot of old-fashioned ideas hurt profits? Take a look at the real facts. Here in Washington, D.C., the nation's capital, some amazing facts and figures about this new market have been uncovered. For a first-hand report, we would like to take you directly to the United States Department of Commerce to hear this story from the Secretary of Commerce himself. Here is the Honorable Sinclair Weeks.
Go ahead and stop right there now. Okay, so Dr. I like the way that he elongated vibes. That was kind of cool.
That dude had a whole tube of Brill cream on his hair.
I guess that's how they got down in 1954.
That's how they got down.
He thought he was doing it. He was doing
it. He was doing it.
He did. Y'all, I don't know why y'all was sleeping on them. Stop it. Stop. Dr. Ball, can you so I know that you kind of wrote about this particular video in your book and basically what the whole purpose was and kind of like what it how it kind of set off this whole like myth and propaganda about Black buying power. Can you kind of go into that a little bit for us, please?
So, I mean, sure. I mean, again, after the Second World War, where Black people were able to enter the labor market a little bit more than they had been previously, there was this increase in income. And the part where you cut off just after that, Chamber of Commerce Secretary Weeks comes out and says, but nowadays Black people earn $15 million. And then he sort of pegs $15 billion. He sort of pegs buying power to that, to again suggest this is the money floating out there that corporations can get their hands on. Mm-hmm. And Johnson wanted to, Johnson was part of a class of Black people in this country that wanted to, maybe it does not as bad as the way I'm putting it here, but take advantage of the moment and to make money. And he wanted to deliver a version of Black pride that would be a way of earning. So the Black pride he wanted to present was sort of what you saw there. You know, we can be middle class like anybody else, and we can eat at fancy restaurants and drive nice cars like everybody else. Mm-hmm. And to present Black people specifically also as not, civil rights. We're not, revolutionaries. We just want the middle class life. Mm-hmm. And if you pay me, I will put a lot of eyeballs and ears on your product. And that's what Johnson was trying to do. And he was successful at it and made a lot of money. And he set a pattern in motion that today is still in full effect, whereby the Black press is helping to literally produce these reports where they say specifically to have white corporations respect us more, meaning spend more advertising on us. Mm-hmm. And there it is. So anyway, that's at least the overview of what. Because when I first saw the video, I didn't see the Johnson tagline on the bottom of the copy that I had. Mm-hmm. So I initially thought this must be like because this is back when I think I had it on VHS first, and I was thinking I had found the underground, white corporate marketing propaganda video, and then later I was like, oh no, this is Johnson. And he in fact it was an award-winning video. The advertising community awarded it with, praised it for it accomplishing what Johnson wanted to accomplish. By the way, there's another aspect real quick of the propaganda effort from the other side, which is while Johnson wanted to make some money by presenting Black people this way, the white elite wanted to present Black people this way globally to promote America, particularly after the Second World War, as the singular power in the world, as being open to even our formerly enslaved can get in on this winning capitalism thing. So all the rest of the world. So when they're after Second World War, and as the United States went to war against communism, they wanted to use this and other things to promote American capitalism as the saving grace of everything. You don't need revolution. You don't need communism. You don't need any of that. You just need a little bit of good advertising and some capital, and even the formerly enslaved can be good. So therefore, everybody in your country, wherever you are, can be good too.
Yeah. Yeah, but that was kind of wrecked in the early 1960s when those pictures and started leaving the country, the dogs and, you know, the fire hoses and all that kind of stuff. And Russia was actually able to use that as propaganda to encourage African nations to become part of their bloc.
That's right. That's absolutely right. So as I mentioned in the book, propaganda isn't always successful. But the argument to me isn't whether it's successful. It's our point should be, what is the intent? So a lot of people, particularly like a lot of my students, you know, particularly a lot of young people, you know, when we're young, we always think we're impervious to everything. So everybody's like, why I overstand everything now. I get everything. So I don't want to argue with them. So I'm saying I'm not arguing whether the propaganda was effective. I just want us to be clear that this is what the elite are trying to do. And so that's at least what I'm saying. You know, so to your point, you're right. It wasn't always effective. It didn't always work in every instance. And other people were obviously able. And obviously, even when Mama Till put out Emmett's picture, I mean, that went around the world and bust up a lot of the mythology too. So propaganda, this is why it keeps having to reform itself. This is why capitalism keeps rebranding itself. It's a constant process. They're like, oh, we lost a little bit here. Let's come back and rebrand over here. And so absolutely, that's what was done.
And I was curious to kind of find out like exactly where like Black America was like at that particular time. Ethan, if can you pull up that chart from @urban? And can you scroll down to where it says average family wealth by race and ethnicity? Okay. Oh, I think you passed it. Go up some more. It says average family wealth by race and ethnicity. Scroll down
right
a little
here.
bit. I think it's a little bit further. It's actually entitled average family wealth by race and ethnicity. So look for average.
That wasn't it right there?
A little bit further.
Yeah, I thought that was it.
Okay, where it says, wait, hold on. Scroll up some. Okay, where it says show medium. Okay. So if you all can see, like I have it pulled up on my screen too, where you can actually look at, it doesn't go all the way back to 1954 when that particular video came out, but the chart that I'm looking at actually goes to 1963. And if you go to like where the median was as far as like family wealth and by race and ethnicity, in 1963, white median wealth, family wealth, was roughly around $47,655. However, where it says non-white was $2,467. So when I even look at numbers like that, and when it just says non-white, I'm assuming that it's just actually just putting in all minorities that were living in America at that particular time, and then doing the average of, as far as, I'm not the average for the median wealth, but it's kind of start to see, because like, you know, usually oftentimes when they talk about minorities, especially that particular time, that was mostly Black folk. And, you know, it's kind of funny how like they actually put this whole thing together, like collectively Black people earn about $15 billion, so that would be money for them that was easy for them to let go and to spend. You can go ahead and take that chart off.
And that's what buying power means. Again, it's the power to enrich the people that own, well, for lack of a better word, way Marx put it, the means of production. So even here, I don't even know why I'm not sure why they do it, but you have the option there to go from average to median. Average should never be used in economics. So I don't even know why they have that option there.
Yeah, that's why
I don't know
that's how I want to put median instead of like average. Yeah,
it should always be median, and then that shows just really how bad it is. But because first of all, as far as I remember, the median Black household has about $6,000 to $7,000 in net wealth today, but also has more than $6,000 in credit card debt.
Right.
So that can't be considered an economically strong or viable situation on its own face. So this is why, again, the issue for me is more propaganda than anything else. Because how else? By the way, the elite, one of the fascinating things, in for me at least, in the course of study of the media history in this country, is that I think it's attributed to Chomsky, but that violence is to totalitarianism what propaganda is to democracy. That is, the more you tell people they're free, the more you have to propagandize them. Because if you're in a dictatorship, you don't have to say anything. You just say, "I'm here, and if you mess up, I'm gonna knock your head off." In here, where we're told constantly we're free, everybody has equal opportunity. You just need all this other propaganda to have, to say, well, no, you're not free because it's the immigrants, or no, you're not free because it's the Black people, or no, you're not free because it's, black, or, if it's to Black people themselves, is no, you're not free because you are your own financially illiterate self holding. So it's all of this propaganda that's needed to hide the fact that 400 families walk off with 95% of all the wealth every year that we create. So even to talk about white people is misleading, because then even the class division within that group is misunderstood. In other words, capitalism, a white supremacist capitalist society, doesn't even work for a majority of white people. Like, that's how messed up it is. Like, even they are really struggling relative to themselves, at least, not to us. But the gaps. So my favorite part of the book, and then I'll stop this rant here, is honestly the part about Nick Hanauer, the venture capitalist, who I heard at 2 a.m. on National Public Radio a couple years ago, and I almost crashed the car because I couldn't believe this venture capitalist was on national radio saying what he was saying. And what he was saying is the rich have to get more money back to the poor so that we can save ourselves, because we don't have, because he said a Starbucks employee doesn't earn enough to actually buy coffee from Starbucks. And when have that level of inequality, the people rebel. And he would say, look, I'm not a socialist. I love the billions that I make every year, but I'm not feeling safe because there's too much inequality. And then we're seeing it. And then I found out, I was mad. I found that after the book went to press, that in 2018, the Air Force was running military drills because they're predicting that by the middle of this century, even before COVID, they were predicting by the middle of this decade, rather, the 2020s, that Generation Z would be in a Z-bellion, because that generation would have finally grown up and realized that they have nothing. They've never had anything. They've been born and they've lived in persistent war and inequality and police violence, and they're going to rebel. So they were already doing military drills, preparing for the response to the inequality that they know they're creating and is going to create hostility. So part of it is a military response, but then part of it is also the propaganda response, which is why Amazon is doing Black Lives Matter and Netflix is putting its Black content out. And even my favorite was when Jamie Dimon took a knee in front of the JP Morgan Chase. You didn't see that part?
Oh, I missed that one.
He literally takes a knee in front of his vault. And I was screaming at the thing, laughing like, dude, open the vault. Don't open that joint. That's what I'm saying. Like, they are in full blown. All the PR companies are making all their money right now, coming up with all these campaigns to make sure that we don't go.
Professor, you made my night with that one, man. I mean, I gotta see that.
Yeah, Google that.
Yeah, I gotta see that.
One of them with a mask on, like on a knee with his fist up.
No.
Oh.
I want so bad to say, if there's any white people listening to this show, please don't do that. Yeah, I know, but don't do that. That's exactly what I need you not to do.
And don't do the Nancy Pelosi Kente Claw.
Oh,
don't do that either.
No.
Oh yeah, don't do that. I posted that picture. I think I put it on Facebook and on Twitter, and I said, "What in the Kente cosplay is this?"
And then you saw her husband got that bailout money. So not only is she worth hundreds of millions or whatever, 100 million, her husband got bailout money.
Right.
Yeah.
Imagine that.
Yeah.
What a coincidence.
Wow. Or is it?
That's what happened.
Oh, right.
Like Ishmael Reed said, you could call me a conspiracy theorist as long as you acknowledge yourself as a coincidence theorist.
Oh, wow.
Well, you know, my whole thing is, and as much as like I love to go after conspiracy theorists, my first question to any person that actually presents a particular theory or conspiracy theory is, what data or what evidence do you have that this is true? You know, and I know that, like, especially but anytime that somebody tells me do your research, I already won. I won the argument. You know, because like the thing about it is that like if you can tell me that this is this or this is happening to this, but you can't present any type of data, you know, I'm less likely to believe you or feel that you just pulled this particular thing out your butt. You know, so one of the things that I definitely appreciated, even with reading your particular book, is like you actually gave us reference points. Yeah, a whole lot of reference points. And I was like, okay, you know, I was like, oh, let me go ahead, especially when you brought up the Bureau of Labor and Statistics. I want to say, excuse me, as I am going through my notes. You talked about how like the Bureau and Labor Statistics was used in order for to gather particular data about spending. However, what their whole portion is basically is to measure unemployment. However, I do see, but when I post like some of their reports, it was just like measuring spending on stuff that people buy every day, like food, clothing, homes, etc. You know, instead of, so I don't know if that would even be a really good measurement to even say that, again, this particular group, since they spend so much money in this particular area, that they have the buying power to do so.
But again, the reason I kept trying to repeat it as much as possible in the book is because that is only meant to measure the money that is made available to specifically spend on what other people own. Mm-hmm. So when my wife and I bought our house, the idea that first of all, how did you all feel after we bought our house? Like, how did your life change? Because I bought a house.
I was about to say, you bought a house?
Exactly. Okay. So that's what I'm saying. Okay. So this idea that I'm contributing to something that's helping other people, but the other part of that is mythologized in that is that the money we spent on this house was specifically money lent to us by a bank, specifically to buy this house. Mm-hmm. You couldn't even take that. You can't even take the bank loan to buy another house. Right. You have to. It's tied to that house.
Tied to that house.
Right. So the same thing. And then when the pipes burst in that house, and we didn't have the $10,000 in the bank to fix the pipes, we got another bank loan to fix those pipes. Mm-hmm. Now all of that money gets counted as buying, as spending, as consuming. But we weren't sitting on hundreds of thousands of dollars that we could have said, well, we could buy that house, or maybe we'll buy stock, or maybe we'll invest in the 13%, or maybe we'll do this or we'll do that. We didn't have that. We again, you go through the paperwork, you qualify for this house, this loan on this house, and that's it. And if you try to go to another house, you got to get the loan reapproved to get approved for that house. They got to reinspect that house because the bank owns it. The bank, right. You're paying the bank. But it goes on the book. Same thing with a car. You buy a car, you get a loan to buy that specific car. The car company has also gotten a loan from a bigger bank to pay their payroll for that day or to cover the cost of bringing in new vehicles for that day based on what business they expect to do that the bank trusts them to pay back later on. All of this is, so by the way, again, I know, Marx is himself propagandized, but in his brilliant work on capital, what is exposed in that is that capitalism works by money moving. So going back to Baradharan's point, we can't just circulate dollars amongst each other and develop wealth. It has to get invested and moved and reinvested to keep the global pyramid scheme going. If you save money, the scheme stops. Everything shuts down. By the way, have you ever gone to the bank and tried to withdraw all the money you've had in the bank at one time? If it's over $5,000 or $6,000, you probably can't do it because the bank has already taken that money and invested it somewhere else. And they'll tell you to come back in a few days and fill out some more paperwork, and then you can take out all your money. So this is. Look, and there's so much more, and I would really encourage people to read Marsha Filipello's book because she really breaks down the history of the banking system in particular.
Yes.
I would really encourage
the color of money.
The color of money.
Yeah, the color of money. I know I've read it. I think that the majority of people that's in the chat right now have read that book.
We have a monthly book that we read in Adidas, and that was one of them. Matter of fact, I met Miss Baradharan in Louisville earlier this year before COVID hit.
Right on.
Interesting lady.
She's very interesting. Her work is strong. We did a couple good interviews as well, and when her book first came out, and big supporter of that work. And then I also like to point to the myth of Black capitalism that Earl O'Farrill wrote in 1970, which going back to the earlier history of this country really breaks down why Black banking can't work, and it has nothing to do with the mythologies again about our financial illiteracy. It has to do with what banks are here to do, and banks are not here to create wealth for poor people. That's not what they're here to do.
Right.
So that that's not going to anyway. And the same thing with Earl O'Farrill's work in terms of the history of Black business and it not being a pathway for the collective. Again, we don't earn enough money. So, but again, I don't want to be misrepresented. This happens all the time. I'm not saying give up and just quit. I'm not saying don't support Black business or Black whatever. I'm just saying we need to have, and I don't have the solution myself. I just am encouraging that we develop some methods to get beyond this particular myth and a couple of others, and then we'll figure out exactly what to do.
Okay. Well, I have a question. There's a quote from your book that I'd like for you to respond to in a particular way.
Okay.
You make this statement, and it goes against the common belief that recirculating dollars within the community is a major way a major way to create a prosperous community. Now, the quote goes, "The forced physical displacement of entire Black communities and the creation of segregated worlds is what imposed an initial sense of an apparent power of an internally circulating Black dollar. However, disconnected from any meaningful participation in the broader economy, those Black dollars could not become capital and thus could not expand. Without expansion as capital investment with returning profits, those small amounts of Black dollars circulating among other mostly poor Black people would never generate wealth. But unlike dollars which lose strength when circulating only within one community, myths in heavily circulation, as is the case with buying power, gain strength exponentially." I agree with the statement. Oh, there he's smiling. But if that's the case, how did economic growth in Tulsa happen? That would seem to be a self-contained economic case where growth did happen anyway, especially since Tulsa existed in extreme segregationist and legally constrictive conditions.
Now, I didn't look at the details for this book, and I'm if I had, I don't want to say I have any regrets, but if I did, this would be one of them. I would have liked to have really dealt with this more specifically. But essentially, the question of Tulsa is really the question I'm trying to explain in another context, maybe in a larger context, with that previous statement. In other words, the what is actually almost, let me not say it that way, what extends the trauma of the white terrorism that crushed Black Wall Street is that it promotes and persists the myth that had that white terrorism not occurred, something would have flourished in Oklahoma that could have been duplicated across the country that would have solved the condition of all the Black community. And one thing that gets lost is that within Tulsa, and again, I don't have the numbers in front of me, and other people's work we would have to get to for the details, but off the top, some of it is mythologized. I mean, the amount of money that was generated in Tulsa relative to other Black communities in, shortly after Reconstruction looked good, but it wasn't creating the kinds of wealth that could be turned into something that was going to satisfy everybody. And I don't know that there was even enough capital and enough businesses in that community to satisfy all the needs of all the consumer interests or desires of everybody in the community. It also, by the way, and I can't prove this with Tulsa, but in terms of other people's work, where whether it's the Black bourgeoisie or Ofari's work or other people who have looked at this, and Baradaran as well, we also don't know that whatever money would have been accumulated among a Black bourgeoisie would have been used to help everybody else. I mean, there is a history of a Black elite being created and saying, I don't give a damn about everybody. People forget that Du Bois came back with the guiding 100th. Because in a speech he gave to the Talented 10th in 1948, he said, you all aren't doing what I thought you were. I didn't say become doctors and lawyers so you could run away from your people. Right. He was saying maybe that we need a smaller group who's actually going to use their advancement to help everybody, unlike the rest of these traders who are just running off with all the money. So that's another part of it. But then the real part is that without the ability for the money that was developed in Tulsa to be invested outside of Tulsa and to accumulate wealth that would be reinvested back into Tulsa, the expansion or the growth couldn't have gone too far. Because again, if you even just think about, even if you just think of it on a family level, if you just take, a 5 or 6 person family or a 4-person family, whatever, and you just take whatever money that they have and just circulate around, where does the more money come in?
Right. Okay.
Like the 4 of us, I might have it, or 3 of us, I might have it for a while. You'll have it for a while. She'll have it for a while. But where does it get expanded?
Right. It's no growth. Okay.
It's slow. The only way for the 3 of us, for instance, would be to pool our money and invest that and hope that got flipped and then came back to us in greater numbers that we could redistribute to have more money. But the idea that we could just circulate the same poor few dollars that we have and have that expand, that's just not how wealth is created. And again, the point really is, part of the propaganda is to say, stay in your own community, shop with each other, buy with each other, and you'll get free. Don't join the political struggle. Don't have mass movements. Don't look at public policy. Just stay over there. While they're over there redirecting all the real wealth that's generated back to themselves.
There was a question that came up for you, Dr. Ball, in the chat. It was from, let's see, I believe that and if I say your name incorrectly, I'm so sorry, but I think it's Omawale Africa.
Oh yeah,
and the question was for Dr. Ball, how do we as a community finance our own liberation absent a mass absent a mass redistribution of wealth from the government?
I don't know of any way, and that's why I'm arguing that if for all above board, legally sanctioned political activity, I think it should be addressed at developing public policy that says redistribute the wealth we're all creating. That's the only hope I see us having. I don't, for instance, I was at a sporting goods store a couple years ago with one of my daughters buying her a soccer ball and some other stuff for soccer, right? And the guy at the counter, the brother just working at the counter, says, "Would you like to donate to cancer research?" And I said no. And then he kind of gave me a look that was meant to like shame me a little bit, like really, like really. And other people were kind of standing around like, "What's wrong with this guy?" And I said, "Look, man," I said, "There's no disrespect, but this is a multi-billion-dollar sporting goods store, and I just spent $80 on a ball and some shorts or whatever. Why Why should I be asked to give more money to cancer research? I just contributed to the billions of dollars that that the owner of this place makes every year. So this store must generate billions more than that. You donate. Like, I'm not like, I've already done my part. I paid for this wildly expensive sporting goods gear. Like, I've done my part. You kick in. Like, you're not gonna shame me. Like, I'm barely making it out here. I'm not ashamed. Like there should be no shame in poverty or relative poverty. There should be no shame in saying we can't afford something. There should be no, and I get this from a friend of mine who said after Katrina that he wasn't going to contribute to the Red Cross. And I was like, Dad, that sounds harsh. But he said, you said we're in the most powerful government in the history of the world with trillions of dollars at its disposal. Why am I being asked to give to the Red Cross? That's the point of the government. That's the point of taxes. Get down there and save them. So that's what I'm saying. That should be how don't come to me asking me for more money from $1 billion company or $1 trillion government. You redistribute. We have already done our job. I pay my bills. I pay my taxes. I go to the movies. I pay the $50 for popcorn every once in a while. You know what I mean? We do all of that. We do all of that. I mean, if I take my two girls to the movies, it's easily $100.
That's that East Coast, man.
But that's that East Coast. And then they put the reclining chairs in the joints now with the cup holders. I mean, come on. But I'm saying we've all done all of that. When you go to get your car fixed, when you go to the gas station, when you buy a soda, when you anything generates all this money. And when we don't do it, again, we're seeing right now what happens. So don't tell me I'm being irresponsible. I'm saving this country's economy when I do that. So that's my consumption and reward it by redistributing the wealth we create. So I don't have to worry about subsidizing someone's cancer research or flood survivors or whatever. That's ridiculous.
And I wanted to show this particular chart because I think it's really important to really, especially when you talk about wealth and share of wealth and who has wealth and who don't. If you, Ethan, can go to, I believe, the last link on the document that you shared.
By the way, if people don't know, Omawale Africa, I'm sure this is the same brother. This dude is sharp as hell, and his work needs to be checked out.
Omawale Africa?
Omawale Africa, and I believe that's his Twitter handle too. If you just search, his work is vicious.
Okay. Nice. All right, well, definitely do. Can you go to page 7? Yep, that one right there. This is where we are, people. So this is actually, and I believe that a lot of people who are actually in the chat are familiar with this report, the Color of Wealth report that was done at the Samuel Du Bois Cook Center on Social Equity. It was a bunch of different people on it, including Dr. Sandy Darity. And this particular calculated by Matt Brunek's demos when he came up with this particular chart from 2013 and actually shows where the percentage of wealth is and what group holds it. And you can actually see 90% of the wealth. I'm going to say that one more time, just in case they can hear me in the back. 90% of the wealth is held in the hands of white folk.
And by the way, forget the interruption, but if I forgot the exact numbers, but I do have the breakdown in my book somewhere. Yeah. Again, that's sort of my point. That as wild as that is even misleading because that 90% is really held by probably less than 1% of that white population. So when you look at who holds the stock and who holds the land and the really wealth producing assets, to say white people is itself misleading. Although this chart is grossly accurate, graphically accurate. That within that white group, it's just a handful of people that have all of that. And it's in part the propaganda that they use to keep the rest of their white folks in line from raising questions about that as well.
But even though you can even say that 90% of the wealth even would be held in that particular maybe top 1-2%, it's still a stark difference from where you would actually see where Black folks actually fall, which is, I believe more accurately, less than 3% of the wealth in the nation. And the majority of that wealth, again, is in like the top 1% of our particular community. So you can go ahead and take that down, Ethan.
I mean, I only like to point that out because when Nick Hanauer and those other venture capitalists are talking about their fears of who's coming to get them, it's not us.
Mm.
It's the white folks that they're saying, because that's what the military was predicting. They didn't say Black Generation Z. They said Generation Z. They mean the white folks who have been fed this myth about their superiority and this being their country. And they're turning around and they're not going to have a damn thing to show either. And they're going to, Occupy Wall Street was a little bit of that.
Mm-hmm.
But they're expecting something much worse. So, and it's not even from us. So as bad as we're getting it, they're worried about, they know that their white folks are the first ones. And they got all the guns too, because they got all the connections in the military. So that's all.
We did see some beautiful militia people in Michigan and other places that are actually flexing with their guns, saying, I ain't gonna wear them daggum masks against my freedoms.
That's right.
America.
And they were grabbing the necks of white folks and even white cops.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
That's who Nick Hanauer and them were worried about. They're not talking
and the white cops wasn't doing a dagger. They was just sitting around like, okay,
because they know those white folks in the streets got more guns than them.
Yes.
They'll snap us up, they'll shoot us down, they'll put their knees on our back. But they know them white boys, they got the 50 cal machine guns and the armor piercing bullets and the explosive rounds and all that extra stuff that they get from the military connects. That's why the police, they were like, I'm not doing a damn thing.
Right. And they have no problem with shooting police.
No, that's what I was going to say, the same thing. They're always talking about Black people. It's the white folks that run up on Texas sheriffs in the middle of the day in their house and shoot them and their wives at lunchtime in the living room. That's the white groups doing that. Black people don't run up on police like that.
No, we're trying to run away from police so we don't get killed
and get shot in the back.
Right.
They're like, I'm not getting shot in the back. I'm gonna be right here,
right now.
Right.
Yep.
50 cal machine gunned up.
Right. Let me get my Kevlar vest going on. Jed is with me. I got you.
All
you know what I'm saying? All that. Yes. Another question from the chat. This is from Josh Gray L. And shout out to Josh Gray L, also one of the brothers from Be the Power that airs on YouTube on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Make sure you guys check them out. He asked Dr. Ball if you agree actually with Matt Brunig. I'm assuming you're referring to the chart that I just put up not too long ago about the wealth distribution.
Yeah, as far as I could see it, I don't disagree at all. I was trying to add some of the details into the breakdown within white folks, but as far as I could see the chart, and if I'm not mistaken, my own work is referenced in that report.
It is.
I don't have any problems with the conclusions there. So I agree. The wealth distribution is horrible. I just like sometimes that white folks. Well, it's not work. White supremacy and capitalism don't even work for white people. So that's back to that. So
it's kind of funny, like when you think about racism, white supremacy, or systemic racism or institutional racism, the whole purpose of it was just to keep a particular group at the top, and it was always white elite. And then so the word of the day is propaganda. Propagandizing the poorer whites to say that, hey, you could be just like us, just side with us, even though we kind of screwing you over too. While we still keep these particular people at the bottom. You know what I'm saying? And even though, like, and of course, like, a lot of people are familiar with the data, especially when it comes to, like, poor whites actually kind of doing better than black folk that even got like degrees, which is crazy. Sometimes I be kind of want to go back to my institution, be like, can I get that, like, 6 figures back real quick? You know what I'm saying? I can kind of use it right now. I'm just saying. Well, the truth. Can people in the family in the chat, can y'all feel me? Like, you feel like going back to your PWR? Sometimes your HBCU be like, yo, can I get that money back? because
Look, the alumni don't come looking for you to get money back. They come looking for you to get more from you.
Yeah, I know. And I'll be like, where? From where? Suriname. Who gonna get this?
Start waving that charter around. Like, I don't have anything. Clearly,
Right, exactly. So and to me, like when I read work like yours and also reading like The Color of Money and like and some of like all the other particular books that are coming out, it's kind of like we are in a place where it's like so important to advocate for policies to actually to close this racial wealth gap. Like we need policies, we need reparations. There's to me, there's no fight about this. It shouldn't be fight about this at all because like the data corroborates what is absolutely needed because like all these particular things that you even espouse in your particular book is about like Black buying power at $1.4 trillion, and it's not even something that we had even when Mr. Johnson pulled that particular number out the sky for the $15 billion in collective income. So we got that money to spend, but we really don't, and we even didn't have it at that particular time. It was just kind of like I almost feel like it's like a whole like trick bag was actually played to say that you got something that you really don't.
And look, the question for me, and this might be, well, I know as we approach the end, it's not a good time to bring up a point of possible disagreement, but it's not that I don't think reparations is deserved. I just think tactically it's never going to be given, in part because of the propaganda that we've been talking about. White people have been convinced that they are not even successful enough because Black people have been given too much already. So the idea that 2/3 of the country would vote to redistribute its wealth just to Black people, I find that difficult to conclude as possible. So this is why I keep saying, if we make the argument about the 20 trillion, then there doesn't have to be a debate about who gets what reparations wise financially. Everybody would be taken care of, and then Black people could do the personal, private things collectively in the community to heal all the other elements of reparative associated with reparative justice that don't come financially. So in part, I don't want white America to get the feeling that, well, we gave them some money and now we're all good. And I also just don't think tactically I just don't see it happening. They won't even sign off on a House resolution to do a study that has already been proven is unnecessary. So
tune in next week when we actually talk about that study, and also because we're going to get into the study, that's a trick bag too. But I will say this though, I hear what you're saying. But I would also say, as being a student, I'm not a historian, but a student of history, no one gets anything without advocating for it. And oftentimes, and even if we kind of look at like the civil rights movement, we didn't get like an actual bill passed for even like basic civil rights to say that, hey, you guys are human too, until 1964, which was 9 years after the civil rights movement actually started. So oftentimes, like a lot of these, even if we can at least like get to the point where we can say that we can agree about advocating for policy that's going to be for the betterment of our community. I know that I don't see anything beyond reparations only because where we are right now, as far as like when you look at the wealth, when you look at income, when you look at even like the centuries of plunder. That we have experienced, and even though we have other groups that are like in a bad space, Black people, especially descendants of chattel slavery, is bad. It's very bad, and it's kind of like and we know that forming a militia ain't gonna work. They ain't gonna squash that. They already sent. I don't know if you got a chance to see that. It was in the Chicago Tribune today that they actually sent like 150. Federal troops to Chicago this week. What their role is unknown at this particular time. So we're really not sure what they're here for, but they know that. But if we kind of look at what happened in Portland, it could be a repeat of that. So who knows? So the only thing that this particular portion that has to happen is it's going to have to be legislation on the federal level.
Mm-hmm.
It has to be
Right.
in order to, because like no group got wealth without government assistance.
And you know that.
That's correct.
You know that.
And that's the only reason why I'm saying tactically we would disagree, because to get that level of federal government support, we're going to need so many more people from other communities to sign off on just giving wealth to Black people. And
Well,
is the part
our job as ADOS is to change minds and surprise people. So Professor, when you get your check, I'm going to expect you to take me to the bar and buy me a drink.
Look, I'll buy you a drink without getting the check. We don't have to wait that long. I would say, look, I know that this is also a point of disagreement, but I think that tactically the ADOS strategy of cutting everyone off does a disservice to that movement. That the federal government support for Black people has always accompanied support from other communities to help get that Black support from the federal government. So this is the only reason why I'm saying at the level of material redistribution, there has to be some sort of collective unified effort with other communities to say, you don't have to sign over to say, cut a check to Black people. Sign over a permanent redistribution of that $20 trillion for everybody, and then everybody will be more than materially taken care of forever.
Sure. But this is what I say, sir. The government is able to do that for other groups. They're able to deal with groups in what I call a separate file. Whenever issues for Jews come up that require resources, they're dealt with in a separate file. No other communities are involved. When it comes to the American Indian, same deal. Okay,
the American Indian has not gotten anything. I don't know what they've gotten.
Well, they
live on $2 a day.
We can talk about that, but I think that when it comes to the case for Black people of chattel that came from chattel slavery in this country, that we have a more substantial case than any other group in this country.
I'm not disagreeing. I'm not disagreeing. My argument is not about deserving. Nobody deserves more than Black people in this country. That's where we agree. I don't disagree. I'm talking about tactically how to get what we deserve is where we disagree. By the way, the Jews used an international struggle that goes well beyond the Jewish community to get what Jews want. The Zionist movement is an international and multi-religious, multi-ethnic movement. Zionism.
That's true, but I will say that even in that particular vernacular, we have to still be more of a concentrated portion about what's here in the United States. The thing about it is, and I understand you're saying you're not necessarily disagreeing as far as like what we deserve as a group,
not at all.
But and also too, like you can and it's going to be difficult to, especially like if you're trying to get buy-in, from other communities. But I will say this, that we and I wish that I had my numbers together. I will have them next week though, about how there are more communities of different people who are outside of our particular community that are actually espousing to support reparations for American descendants of slavery. And also, and I know that we have like dissenters, but you do have a growing number of actually people who are actually seeing that this is something that's absolutely necessary at this particular time.
And what form of reparations are they advocating? Do you have any idea about that? Because again, my point is that I don't want to get, well, I don't know exactly what you all are advocating in terms of reparations, and there's different ways it could be delivered. But the idea that go ahead.
Well, it's more of, and unfortunately, I'm going to have to wrap this up pretty soon.
Sure.
But it would be cash payments and also set asides, which will be multi-generational. So and as far as like what that looks like, again, I don't have the time to actually go through all that right now. But it's not just cash. It will be also initiatives as well in order to help actually make a specific community whole. Right. But cash is definitely going to be a good part of that. I would push back on saying just give Black folk a $350,000 check and call it a day. That's not going to fix the issues that we're actually dealing with as a company, not as a community. But as I mentioned before, like, yes, cash is going to be definitely a big part of it, but it's also going to be other initiatives to address a lot of the different things that we are dealing with as a people, and also to help make the community whole. And on that note, I will have to say thank you, Dr. Ball.
Thank you. And listen,
thank you so much.
If I get my check, you get one drink from me no matter what. If I get
One
the check,
drink.
that's two. If I get a check, that's two. So thank you both very much. I appreciate your time.
I appreciate you coming. Thank you again for talking with us and really going through this myth and propaganda that we are dealing with, and even talking about some solutions. So, and I also want to thank everybody for actually tuning in. Thank you everyone in the chat for with your questions and your comments. This is the largest viewed show that we have had since the 13% has been streaming. Yay! Give it up for that. All right. And I want to thank all my, my people who were on the Twitters and the Facebooks and all my and the chapters and all my ADOS family that was sharing, like, yes, please watch this show. So I'm so glad that you all got on your square and was really sharing this content. So thank you. So again, like this video, people. If you haven't shared it yet, please share it on your different platforms. If you like the content, we do have a Patreon. All that information is in the show notes. You can click on the Patreon and become a patron to actually support this content. You can also go to the link to buy us a coffee. I like my coffee black, no sugar, no cream. Because that puts fat on. You know what I'm saying?
I thought you were going to say that was the hip hop reference.
Right, I play black sugar. And I like that song. Yeah, I do. I like that song. I ain't gonna lie. Yeah, I'm a hip hop head. You know what I'm saying?
I thought that's where you were going, but that's good. Yeah.
Black coffee, no sugar, no cream. Hey,
I need down with my team. Yeah. Okay.
Awesome. Okay, so everyone, again, thank you for watching. Tune in next week. We're gonna have our brand new penny again, Mr. Arthur Ward, and I'm going to be talking more on this particular topic about reparations and and everything that comes with it, and if it's viable, all that great stuff. So we're definitely going to be getting into the weeds of that. And again, we will see you all on the by and by. Thank you.
Peace, everybody.
Peace and goodbye.